Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through Chow and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack, the Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. It's always a privilege to interview clergy in our area who have responded to the call of the gospel and have given their lives to serving God's church. One of those clergy in our area, he's no stranger to many of you, is Daniel Ling. Daniel Ling has been pastor at several of our United Methodist congregations in the area, and also has served as interim pastor at some of the other churches in our area as well. He's got an amazing story, so we're going to talk with Daniel Ling today. Daniel, it's great to have you on Encounter.
Thank you.
So Daniel, let's start off at the beginning.
Yes.
How were you called into ministry?
I was called into ministry in a very amazing way. I have two mothers. I have my biological mother and my adoptive mother. She was a woman from China, and God called her to ministry. But at that time, women were not ordained.
Right.
So she became the first woman ordained in Malaysia as a Methodist pastor. And my father said, all men pastors have wives, have children to help. He said, you are single. She said, if God will ordain you, but through the church, I will give you a girl and a boy to help you in the ministry.
Oh, wow.
So my sister was 7 years old, and my mother gave her to my aunt. She cried. You know, imagine 7-year-old.
Yeah.
It was traumatic for her. So by the time it came to give a boy, my father said, I have 6 boys. My father had 6 boys and 6 girls.
Oh, wow.
12, cheaper by the dozen. So he said, who wants to go? I volunteered. And so by the grace of God, you know, at the age of 12, I became a PR.
Oh,
PK.
PK.
Yeah, pastor's kid, yeah.
Yeah.
So through the grace of God, when I graduated from high school, you know, God called me and I answered the call to ministry. So I went to Trinity Theological College in Singapore in 1965.
All right.
Graduated in 68 and started my ministry in 1970 in Malaysia.
Now, Malaysia was before we came on the show to do some taping, we were talking a little bit about how Malaysia and Singapore and Trinity kind of came around. You want to share a little bit about that story?
Yes, Malaysia was a British colony, and Singapore joined Malaysia, but the leadership in Malaysia now, you know, Islam is the national religion. Mm-hmm. So if you're a Christian, you are not allowed to evangelize Muslim. Mm-hmm. You could be arrested. But there were Christians in Malaysia and also in Singapore. But the leadership of Malaysia and Singapore was so different that they wanted special privileges for the Malays in Malaysia. Singapore government Prime Minister is a Chinese, Lee Kuan Yew. And he says, no, Malaysia for Malaysians, no special privileges. They say, in that case, get out. So they kicked Singapore out, and Singapore is a tiny island, but by the grace of God, Singapore was turned into a richest country, tiny island in Southeast Asia by Lee Kuan Yew. And you know, Warren Buffett,
Yeah.
he had the bust of Lee Kuan Yew in his office.
Oh, wow.
He admired Lee Kuan Yew. He said he's one of the greatest leader in Southeast Asia, in fact, in the world, in terms of leadership quality. No nonsense, no corruption, and you can't even get chewing gum in Singapore. They ban chewing gum.
Right, right.
And the streets are very clean. And so Singapore is very, very attractive to tourists because it's very safe, and a lot of people were glad that Lee Kuan Yew turned it into a dynamic city.
Now, how did you get from Malaysia, or where you were serving in churches there, to the United States? What was the story there?
Very good question. I got a scholarship to go to Perkins School of Theology, SMU in Dallas, Texas. So I said, wow, this is an opportunity for me to travel. So I went to Perkins, and then I got my Master of Theology degree. And then a professor said, do you want to go and do a PhD? I'll write you a recommendation. So he did, and then I got a scholarship to go to Drew University in the north. And I say, wow, another Methodist university. So at Drew, I had to study 2 languages, German and French. There's a requirement.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
no assumption. Good thing that I work in a language lab.
Right.
And so German and French was not too hard for me. So you had to pass that before you can, start your program.
Right.
So I did, and so I wrote on my thesis, Virtue and Obligation According to Thomas Aquinas and Immanuel Kant. Both writers are unknown to me, but
Right.
I enjoy a challenge.
Well, and it would have been a challenge to compare Thomas Aquinas and Immanuel Kant too.
Right.
So so you were at Perkins, you were at Drew, and how did you become a pastor in New York?
That's right. At Drew, the district superintendent of the Wyoming Conference, at that time it was called Wyoming Conference, now it's the Upper New York Conference, came to Drew and recruited me. And he had 2 churches in the Pocono Mountains, 2 hours drive. So he said, we need a student pastor. I said, sure. So he ordained me, and I drove from Drew every Friday night and went to Sterling and Hollister View in the Pocono Mountain. And there's a trailer parsonage. That's the last trailer parsonage I live in. And we served 2 churches there for 4 years. After 4 years, at Drew, they give you 10 years, to write your dissertation.
Right.
Yeah, if you do part-time. So I was part-time. I was working, as a pastor, 2 churches. So after 4 years, I said, I better knuckle down and finish my dissertation and graduate. So when I graduated, then they sent me to a little town called Beach Lake in Pennsylvania. And then at Beach Lake, they sent me to a town called Moscow in Pennsylvania. And at Moscow, they wanted to build an educational building, but there was no money. They were behind $20,000 in the budget.
Wow.
They want to build an educational building that cost $60,000.
And they were behind by $20,000 on their budget. Huh?
Yeah, in our budget.
Jeez.
But by the grace of God, in 3 years, we built the building.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the bishop came and said, okay, you are now going to be district superintendent of Binghamton district. So from Moscow, I came to Binghamton. And that's how I got 61 churches, Binghamton all the way to Sayre. And so that's how I came to Binghamton.
Now, when you're thinking about your ministry and what it's meant, and you're looking back on close to 56 years of service, what do you think? What has been what is the one thing that you want to be remembered for?
I don't really think about those things. All I think is that whatever I do in ministry, I must have joy.
Right.
Yeah, I must enjoy what I'm doing. So every church that the bishop sends me, that's the first time they have a Chinese Malaysian as the pastor.
Right.
And you know, those days, you don't know who is coming until the very night that the DS. So the committee, you know, PPR committee was sitting there, and when I walk in, they were like, ah, he's an Oriental. Like I came from Mars or what. And most of them, you know, are ignorant about Malaysia or Southeast Asia. And
they want to treat you all as if you're just Chinese, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then after that, they were actually very grateful that, you know, they have world culture now. You know, here's a Chinese, because they never would even think of having a Chinese as their pastor. And here's a Chinese Malaysian, but I'm Chinese by birth, but upbringing, I am international.
Right.
Yeah, because I have English as my first language. And so English was not a problem. Whenever they ask us, you know, where do you learn how to speak English? I say, my high school diploma came from Cambridge University. So that's always an interesting, eye-opening experience, both for them and for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what were some of the biggest hurdles that you faced as a pastor of predominantly Anglo-Saxon or white people?
I don't remember any real hurdle. I think initially is that what do we call surprise that you will send us a Chinese pastor. And after that, I think once we get to know each other, I don't think color becomes an issue. My boys, though, have a problem. You know, when they went to South Carolina, you know, in the Methodist church, I'm the first pastor after 6 years. At that time, Upper New York Conference said, you can take the 7 year off as a sabbatical.
Right, right.
And they give you $10,000 scholarship. But most pastors couldn't do it because they have debt.
Right.
I don't have any debt. My father told me, if you cannot pay cash, you cannot afford it.
Right.
So I always pay cash for whatever I have. So I took that 1 year off. We went to South Carolina, and my son went to a school, and they gave him a form. In the form, it says, white, black, and other. My son came home and said, you know, under the form, it says, race. So my son said, Dad, I'm not white, I'm not black, why am I other? So I say, under race, you just write there, human. So those are the kind of little things, you know, you have to have a sense of humor to survive.
Right.
Instead of getting angry or instead of rebelling, just let it go. I go with the flow.
Right.
So I usually have very little friction, because if somebody is angry at me, it's not my problem to react. You know, I just smile. So if I don't say anything, nothing happens. But if I react, and if I smile, it will actually drive them nuts, because they'll be wondering, what is he trying to say?
My guest today is Daniel Ling, and we're talking about his 56 years of ministry. And now let's shift a little bit to what's the difference? And I know that you served as an interim pastor for several congregations in our area. What's the difference that you feel between serving as a interim minister and serving as a full-time called pastor of a church?
Excellent question. I actually enjoy being interim, because you know your days are numbered, you know. So I say to them, I say, look, I'm here temporary. And I also say to them, I say, you are here temporary. What made you think that you will be here permanently, right? So as an interim, I usually adapt very quickly. I'm very, adaptable.
Right.
Every situation I walk into, I can size up the situation. And so for interim, I know no matter how hard it is, it won't be for long.
Right.
And so while I'm here, I'm going to enjoy. So that's, for me, interim is very nice. You go in, and you had a good time, and then you leave.
And do you prepare what are steps that you go through to prepare them for a full-time pastor?
That's a good question, because I never had that I'm going in there to prepare them for pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I think I go in there to say that while you are waiting to have a pastor, I'll be the best pastor that you ever have, you know. And so I don't really prepare them. Yeah, that's not in my mind. Yeah.
All right. And when you're, does it influence how you preach to the congregation?
Another good question, because when I preach, I usually preach from my heart. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I usually preach directly to the person. In other words, I don't use manuscript. I prepare, I write notes. But once I preach, my wife keeps telling me, don't read from your script. That's the most boring sermon. So now we visited, churches, and if a pastor read from the script, she will go to sleep. So I usually memorize my point, and then I speak from my heart. Yeah, and I think if I can have eye contact with somebody, I speak from my heart, and whatever comes, I think is the work of the Holy Spirit. I always believe that the Holy Spirit is the one that enables me, by God's grace, to preach the gospel.
I preach similarly. I almost always have, I tell people I have a manuscript, or I have a, I always remember what Will Willimon said. He basically said, you have a manuscript, he has a manuscript, he gets to the point where he almost memorizes it. He doesn't like to do it by rote. But he gets to the point where he almost has it memorized, and then he forgets it.
Right.
And that way he can be present in the moment with people. So that's kind of how I preach too. And I think that one of the misnomers that people hear, like when they're thinking about preaching from the heart, that there isn't a lot of preparation that goes into that.
Right.
So there is, though.
There
right?
is, yes, yeah. In fact, it takes more preparation, because you almost have to kind of write down first, and then you have to read it yourself, and then because you want to have eye contact with the congregation, you don't want to read from your script.
Right.
Yeah, so I always say, okay, Holy Spirit, take over.
Right.
Yeah.
And that shows a little bit of faith as well.
Yes.
In the process as well. So it's more about the way that God wants to interact through you to others, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. This is an amazing conversation that we're having. So when you're thinking through the theology of preaching in that way,
yes.
I mean, there's a call and response that goes on between the pastor and the congregation too, right? So
yes.
The congregation has some influence on how you're speaking as well, right?
Yes. In fact,
in what way?
Yeah. In fact, I was influenced when I was in Texas. I said to my classmate, I said, "You belong to a black church?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Can you take me to your church? I want to hear a black preacher." You know, it's very different.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, when the black preacher preaches, the congregation will respond. So I went in there, and the black preacher will preach, and if the preacher repeats the point too many times, the congregation will tell him, go on. Go
Get off
on.
Of
He
it.
said, we got it. We got it.
Yeah.
And so that opened my eyes, because when I was in a seminary, there are a few things that I had to learn to be a chaplain, One was hospital visit. When you go to the hospital as a chaplain, you say to the patient, how can I help you? And the chaplain director says, the patient says, please don't step on my oxygen tube. Sometimes we are so nervous, we have to be careful what we are doing. And so it's interesting training to be a chaplain. And another time I had to ride in a police car for 8 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was part of the training, how emergency situation. And many times in Texas, Friday night, there's a lot of guns and shooting.
Oh, man.
And the other experience I have is to watch a live operation, surgery.
Oh, wow.
I almost passed out.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I never had to see a live, the surgeon with a knife cutting right in front of you. Mm-hmm. And the worst one, of course, was also autopsy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all those things, I said, why do we have to do that? He said, well, if you have a church member who's going through,
right,
they need to know, and you have to be a helper in helping them make the decision.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've always found it important to be able to talk people through it before it happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
So one of the other things that I know about you is that you like badminton.
Yes.
How has that been? And why is it important for pastors to have hobbies and to have sports and other kinds of things that they're involved in?
Thank you for asking that. A lot of pastors, how the nature of the work is you sit a lot.
Right.
Yeah, and you don't exercise. So if you see a pastor with a pouch, you know that they're not exercising. And to me, health is wealth. So part of my, desire is to stay healthy. And badminton is a very fast game. If you ever played badminton, you will be surprised how hard they can smash a birdie faster than they can hit a tennis ball. Yeah, and so in Malaysia, we play badminton. And in front of my house, we have a badminton court. So every evening, people will come and play. So I joined that. Then in America, I play tennis. In Malaysia, you can't afford to play tennis because you have to belong to a tennis club. Mm-hmm. Only the rich can afford. But when I came to America, I said, whoa, there are so many tennis courts, public. So I took up tennis. And of course, the game is the same because my basic game was table tennis. Mm-hmm. The table tennis and the badminton and the other thing, what do we call the courts and the placements of shots, they are all the same. So I kept myself fit, and I'm just thankful that by the grace of God, I'm fairly healthy, no pain.
And do you still play?
I still play, yes. In fact, Boulevard Church, you remember, has a gym, and the pastor, Charlie Young, plays with me.
Oh, wow.
And he is 25 years younger than me.
And do you beat him?
Oh, I make him run. He just shake his head every time he play. He just shake his head that I can make him run, and he's strutting away. Yeah. I say, look, you are younger, but I have experience. Experience. It's control of the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to play racquetball before I had rotator cuff issues.
Oh.
And
okay.
I used to play with a guy who was retired. He was 65, 70 years old at the time, and I was very young. I was like not even. I think I was 30-ish when I started playing with him. And he would have me running all over the racket.
Over, right.
And there was one, I took it as a crown because I beat him one time.
One time.
Wow. And that was the only time I ever beat him. And it was because I was diving and running around and doing all kinds of stuff, and he was just sitting there just placing stuff. And it speaks to your point. I mean, there's something that happens with experience that
experience. Yeah, that's right.
That happens like that.
Right.
So now you're a retired minister, and what when you're thinking about advice that you give to congregations and to younger pastors,
Yes.
what are some of the key points that you like to bring up with them?
I usually say to the pastor and the congregation, I say, the most important thing in ministry is community. I said, you need to make every person who comes to church feel that they belong there, you know. And for me, community is very, very important. And I think what breaks community is the feeling of being hurt. You know, a lot of people get hurt in church, and once they are hurt either by the pastor or by another church member, guess what they do? They leave.
Yeah.
You know, and they go to another church, guess what happened?
They get hurt.
They get hurt again. So I say, you know, Jesus said, if you are hurt, he says, don't hate your enemy, love your enemy. And how do you get rid of your enemy? He says the best way to get rid of your enemy is to turn them into your friend. And you know what? We never forget, remember is Jesus says, you know, God says, vengeance belongs to me. I will repay. If I don't remember that, then I say vengeance belongs to me. I will pay, make sure, you know, pay back. One of the greatest leader, Nelson Mandela,
Yeah.
after how many years? 27 years in prison. He came out and he became the president. And the people say, payback time. All the people who, he says, no. Vengeance belongs to God. God will repay. You cannot repay, because if you take one eye, guess what I'll do? I'll take 4 eyes out of you. If you take, you know, one nose. So it's a question of that we have to let God do the vengeance.
So there's a difference, though, between vengeance and what went on within South Africa and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
That's right.
So in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the purpose was to reveal what happened.
Yes.
So that they could move through it into a future, right?
Yes.
So what's the difference, do you think, between vengeance and that?
Oh, big difference. Bishop Tutu was the chair, and Bishop Tutu actually got a mother whose son was brutally murdered by a South African guard. And so the question asked the mother is, what are you going to do? What will you say to this person? And you know what the mother said? Everybody said, you know, punish him. He says, no. I want him to come to my house every Friday so I can show him the love that I could not show to my son who was murdered by him. And the guard actually fainted.
My guest today has been Daniel Ling. Thank you for being on Encounter today.
Thank you.